I pulled into the gravel lot as the sun touched the horizon, painting the single-story brick building in shades of orange that made it look less like a police station and more like a forgotten school. The transfer paperwork crinkled in my hands as I double-checked the address. 6 months here, then back to Columbus for my permanent assignment. Rural experience, they'd called it. Character building. The front door opened before I could knock. Officer Crane? The woman who stepped out wore sergeant stripes on a uniform that looked like it had seen decades of use, though she couldn't have been older than 30. Dark skin, military posture, eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in the span of a handshake. "Beverly Singh, we spoke on the phone." "Yes, ma'am." Paige Crane, reporting for duty. She handed me a leather journal, the kind you'd find in an antique shop. The cover read, "Station Protocol," in faded gold lettering. "Your orientation manual. Read it tonight before your first shift." I flipped it open to a random page. Never acknowledge Officer Isabella Harrison under any circumstances. Do not make eye contact. Do not respond to requests for assistance. Do not ask questions about her presence. Is this some kind of hazing thing? I looked up to find Beverly watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Keep reading. Always lock all doors immediately when someone addresses you by your first name. This includes windows, filing cabinets, and any container with a latch. Failure to comply within 60 seconds results in dimensional breach." I laughed, but it came out hollow. Dimensional breach? Come on. Beverly stepped back toward the entrance. "Welcome, Paige." My name hit the air wrong. The sound stretched and warped, turning into static that made my teeth ache. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out except a low buzzing noise that seemed to originate from somewhere behind my sternum. My hands moved without conscious thought. Door locks. I had to lock the doors. The compulsion hit like a physical force, driving me toward the entrance as Beverly stepped aside. My fingers found the deadbolt and twisted it home with a click that echoed too loudly in the small space. "What the hell was that?" I managed to croak. "Survival training." Beverly walked past me toward the dispatch desk. "Check the windows." I stumbled to the first window, my hands still shaking as I secured the latch. The journal felt heavier in my other hand, like it was absorbing moisture from the air. "This isn't possible." Second window, then the filing cabinets. Each lock I turned made the static in my ears fade a little. By the time I'd secured the last cabinet, my voice had returned to normal. Beverly sat at the dispatch console, calmly sorting through paperwork as if she hadn't just demonstrated something that violated every law of physics I understood. "How did you do that?" "I didn't do anything. You heard your name spoken in this building after sunset. The station responded according to its nature." She gestured toward the journal. "Page 12 explains the acoustic properties. Page 37 covers the temporal mechanics." I flipped to page 12. The handwriting was different from the earlier pages, cramped and urgent. Sound distortion occurs when names are spoken with intent after 6 p.m. The building exists partially outside normal space-time. Locking mechanisms create temporary barriers that prevent full dimensional overlap. "This is insane." Beverly stood and walked toward the back of the station. "I'm going to step outside and call your name again. You forgot to check the rear exit." "Wait, don't..." But she was already through the back door. Her voice came through the walls like it was being filtered through water and broken glass. "Paige. Paige Crane." The sound made the fluorescent lights flicker in rhythm with my heartbeat. I ran to the back door and threw the deadbolt just as something that might have been my name but stretched into syllables that hurt to hear pressed against the other side. The lights stopped flickering. Beverly came back through the front entrance, which I definitely remembered locking. "Better. You're learning. How did you get back in?" "You secured the back door but not the front. The station only responds to incomplete compliance." She settled back at the dispatch desk. "Coffee's in the break room. You'll want some. It's going to be a long night. I stared at the journal in my hands. The leather felt warm now, almost alive. These rules. They're real. Every single one. Written by officers who learned them the hard way. Beverly pulled out a stack of incident reports. Some of them are still here in a manner of speaking. The lights flickered again, just once when I thought about dismissing the whole thing as an elaborate prank. I looked down at the journal and started reading from the beginning. Rule 1. This station exists at the intersection of multiple realities. What you consider impossible is merely Tuesday night shift. Rule 2. Never assume you understand the nature of what you encounter. Assumption leads to protocol violation. Protocol violation leads to death or worse. Rule 3. The entities you will meet were once officers like yourself. Show them the respect you would want in their position. I kept reading as Beverly answered dispatch calls in a voice so normal it made everything else seem like a fever dream. But every few minutes, she'd glance at me with an expression I was starting to recognize. She'd seen this before. She'd watched other officers sit in this same chair, reading these same impossible rules, trying to rationalize their way out of accepting what was right in front of them. The journal had 47 pages. I memorized every word. I kept my eyes locked on the computer screen when the front door opened at 2 a.m., even though every instinct screamed at me to look up and greet whoever had just walked in. The journal's warning about Officer Isabella Harrison burned in my memory. Never acknowledge. Never make eye contact. Never respond to requests for assistance. Footsteps crossed the linoleum, crisp, measured, exactly what you'd expect from a patrol officer coming off shift. I forced myself to focus on the incident report I was typing, some mundane vandalism call from earlier that evening. The cursor blinked at me while I tried to remember what came after "suspect fled on foot toward." The footsteps stopped. I could feel someone standing in the doorway, watching me. The urge to glance up was almost physical, like an itch I couldn't scratch. My peripheral vision caught a glimpse of navy blue uniform, perfectly pressed, standard issue. Nothing unusual about that. 20 minutes passed. The figure hadn't moved. My neck started cramping from keeping my head down, but I didn't dare adjust my position. The computer screen blurred as my eyes watered from staring at the same paragraph. I backspaced and retyped the same sentence 3 times, my fingers moving just to have something to do. Officer. The voice was professional, calm, male. I need assistance with a traffic accident on Highway 16. I kept typing. The words on the screen might as well have been hieroglyphics for all the sense they made, but I kept my fingers moving across the keyboard. Click, click, click. There are victims who need immediate medical attention. The voice had a strange quality to it, like an echo that happened before the original sound. It bounced off the walls in a way that shouldn't be possible in a room this small. I saved the document and opened a new one, starting a fresh report about absolutely nothing. From the corner of my eye, I caught something that made my stomach lurch. The figure's reflection appeared in the window behind me, but also in the computer monitor, and in the glass covering the duty roster on the wall. 3 different reflections, all slightly out of sync with each other. Please. The voice moved closer. People are dying. No footsteps. The voice had moved, but I hadn't heard any sound of movement. I typed faster. Random words now. Incident report, traffic violation, routine patrol. Anything to keep my hands busy and my eyes down. The temperature dropped like someone had opened a freezer door. My breath started misting as I exhaled, and I had to resist the urge to rub my arms for warmth. The heating system hadn't made a sound, but the air felt like winter had suddenly invaded the station. 2 hands slammed down on my desk. I jumped but kept my eyes on the screen. The hands were pale, wearing regulation black gloves. They pressed against the metal surface hard enough that I could feel the vibration through the desk legs. Look at me. The voice was right above me now, desperate. Just look at me, and I can explain everything. I opened a new browser window and navigated to the department's online training modules, anything to keep my focus away from the figure leaning over my desk. The hands lifted and slammed down again, rattling my coffee mug. There's a family trapped in their car, a little girl who can't be more than 6 years old. The voice cracked. She's calling for her mother. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. The description was so vivid, so specific. What kind of person would I be if I ignored a child in danger? But the journal had been clear. Never respond to requests for assistance, no matter what. I clicked on a training video about proper radio protocol and let it play, the narrator's monotone voice filling the silence. The figure straightened up and I could sense him pacing behind my chair. I've been trying to reach them for hours. The car is upside down in the ditch, and I can hear them crying. His voice was breaking now, shifting from professional calm to raw panic. Please, I just need someone to help me get them out. The pacing stopped. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees, and frost started forming on the inside of the windows. My breath came out in white puffs as I scrolled through the training materials, pretending to read about chain of custody procedures. I know you can hear me. The voice was directly behind my chair now. I know you want to help. That's why you became a cop, isn't it? To help people? He was right. That was exactly why I joined the force. The weight of that truth pressed against my chest like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe the suddenly frigid air. But the journal had been specific. Isabella Harrison was not to be acknowledged under any circumstances. My name is Isabella Harrison, badge number 2847. I've been with this department for 2 years, and I have never asked for backup unless I absolutely needed it. The voice moved around to my left side. I'm asking now. I closed the training video and opened the personnel database, typing in random search terms. The screen flickered, and for just a moment, I thought I saw a face reflected in the monitor. Young, earnest, with the kind of expression that belonged on recruitment posters. But when I blinked, there was only my own tired reflection staring back. There's so much blood. The voice was quieter now, almost a whisper. The little girl stopped crying 10 minutes ago. I think she might be. I gritted my teeth and kept typing. The cursor blinked accusingly at me as I entered meaningless data into search fields. The voice continued describing the scene in horrific detail. Twisted metal, broken glass, a woman's voice calling weakly for help. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. An hour passed. The voice grew more frantic, more desperate. It described the victims by name now. Jennifer Walsh, age 34. Marcus Walsh, age 6. Little Sarah Walsh, who would have started kindergarten next month. The details were so specific, so heartbreaking, that I had to bite my tongue to keep from responding. The figure started flickering. I caught it in my peripheral vision, the navy blue uniform strobing like a broken television signal. One moment solid, the next translucent, then solid again. The flickering got faster, more erratic, until the entire figure looked like it was vibrating between dimensions. Why won't you help me? The voice was distorting now, stretching and compressing like a recording being played at the wrong speed. Why won't anyone help me? The flickering intensified. The temperature plummeted until ice crystals started forming on my keyboard. The lights overhead began strobing in rhythm with the figure's fluctuations, casting wild shadows across the walls. Then, suddenly silence. The temperature returned to normal. The lights stopped flickering. I waited another 10 minutes before finally looking up. The station was empty. I walked to the front door and checked the lock. Still secure. I hadn't heard it open or close. But then again, I hadn't heard footsteps either, despite watching someone pace around my desk for over an hour. My hands shook as I pulled up the personnel database and typed in Isabella Harrison. The file loaded immediately. Officer Isabella Harrison, badge number 2847. Hired 2 years ago. Excellent performance reviews. Commendations for community service. Status: deceased. Date of death: 3 years ago. Cause: killed in the line of duty responding to a traffic accident on Highway 16. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. 3 years ago. But the file said he'd been hired 2 years ago. The dates didn't match, but then again, nothing about this place followed normal logic. I scrolled down to the incident report. Multiple vehicle collision during severe weather. Officer Harrison responded to calls for assistance, but never returned to the station. His body was found the next morning in his patrol car, which had somehow ended up in the same ditch as the accident victims he'd been trying to save. All victims were pronounced dead on arrival. The report was signed by Sergeant Beverly Singh. I closed the file and sat back in my chair, staring at the empty station. Isabella Harrison had been dead for 3 years, but he'd just spent an hour begging me to help him save people who had died the same night he did. The journal's warning made perfect sense now. Acknowledging him would have meant stepping into his loop, becoming trapped in the same impossible rescue mission that had killed him. When Beverly arrived at 6 a.m., she found me still sitting at my desk, staring at the computer screen. "How was your night?" she asked, hanging up her jacket. "Quiet," I lied. She nodded approvingly. "Good. That means you followed protocol." She poured herself coffee and settled at the dispatch console. Isabella can be very persuasive. Most officers don't make it through their first encounter without at least trying to respond. "What happens if they do?" Beverly looked at me over her coffee mug. "They join him. Highway 16 has claimed a lot of good officers over the years. Isabella's just the most recent." I thought about the desperate voice, the detailed descriptions of victims who needed help. He really believes he can save them, doesn't he? He believes it because it's true. In his timeline, those people are still dying, every night, for the past 3 years. Beverly's expression was grim. The accident created a temporal loop. Isabella exists in the moment just before he could have made a difference, forever trying to complete a rescue that's already failed. And if I had helped him, you would have become part of the loop, another officer trying to save people who died 3 years ago, convinced that this time would be different. She set down her mug. The station exists at the intersection of multiple realities, Paige. Some of those realities are traps. I looked around the empty station, wondering how many other dead officers I might encounter. How many other impossible situations I'd have to ignore while people, or things that used to be people, begged for help I couldn't give. "Is this what you meant by character building?" Beverly almost smiled. "You passed the second test. Most officers don't have the discipline to resist their own compassion." She pulled out a stack of paperwork. "But don't get comfortable. Isabella was just the beginning." I spent the rest of my shift reading the journal again, paying special attention to the entries about temporal loops and dimensional displacement. The handwriting changed from page to page, as if multiple people had contributed to the manual over the years. Some entries were clinical and precise. Others were scrawled in obvious panic, with words crossed out and rewritten. One entry, near the back, was written in handwriting I was starting to recognize as my own. "Remember that compassion without wisdom is just another form of cruelty. The dead don't need your help. The living do." I hadn't written those words, but somehow I knew I would. The radio crackled to life at 11:47 p.m., cutting through the quiet hum of the station's fluorescent lights. "Unit 779. This is dispatch with priority traffic." I reached for the handset, grateful for something normal after 2 nights of impossible encounters. "Dispatch, this is 779. Go ahead." "Marcus, who wasn't. Jennifer never was. The Harrison child who exists doesn't exist." My hand froze halfway to my notepad. The voice was clear, Professional female dispatcher, calm delivery, but the words made no sense. I flipped through the journal looking for guidance on garbled transmissions. Dispatch, please repeat your last transmission. Sarah Walsh walking through Miller Street died 3 years ago Tuesday. Tommy Chen at the gas station. Heart attack next month, but buying cigarettes now. The Morrison baby, stillborn but crying in the park. Each name came through crystal clear, but they overlapped somehow, like multiple recordings playing at slightly different speeds. I found the relevant page in the journal. When Dispatcher Little provides information, respond only with badge number and standard acknowledgement phrases. Never request clarification or repetition. Too late for that. 779 copies, I said, writing down exactly what I'd heard. The words looked insane on paper, but the journal had taught me that insane didn't mean untrue. The Hendricks family driving Highway 16 right now, collision in 14 minutes unless someone warns them, but warning them creates the collision, so don't warn them. But they'll die if you don't. But they're already dead. But they haven't died yet. The voice was starting to fracture. What had been one clear transmission was becoming multiple voices speaking the same words at different times, creating an echo effect that made my teeth ache. 779 acknowledges dispatch traffic. Paige Crane, badge number 4471, hired Monday. Will sign the contract Friday, already signed it yesterday, refuses to sign it tomorrow. The voice was crying now, but the tears sounded like static. I can see all of it, all the timelines, all the choices that haven't happened yet. I set down my pen. She knew my name. She knew my badge number. She knew things about me that I hadn't told anyone. Anna, I said before I could stop myself. The scream that came through the radio shattered my coffee mug. The sound wasn't just loud. It was wrong, like someone had taken a human voice and stretched it across dimensions. The radio speakers sparked, and every piece of electronic equipment in the station flickered. The lights strobed in rhythm with the scream, casting wild shadows that moved independently of their sources. Then, silence. I stared at the radio, my ears ringing. The display showed normal frequency, normal signal strength, but the air in the station felt different now, charged with the kind of electricity that comes before thunderstorms. Anna Little, dispatcher, badge number 1205. The voice came through again, but softer now, broken. Died in 1987, but still working dispatch, still trying to help, still seeing everything that was and is and will be. Movement in my peripheral vision made me look up. A woman stood by the dispatch console, translucent and flickering like a bad television signal. She appeared to be in her 20s, wearing a powder blue blouse and navy skirt that looked like they belonged in the 1980s. But as I watched, her appearance shifted. Sometimes younger, sometimes older, sometimes a child, sometimes elderly. All the same person at different points in time, occupying the same space. She reached toward the radio equipment with hands that passed through the controls. "I look too deep," she said, her voice coming from the radio speakers instead of her mouth. Saw the connections between all the calls, all the accidents, all the deaths. Saw how they linked together across time. Human minds aren't supposed to process that much truth at once. I grabbed the journal and flipped to the section on supernatural entities. Anna Little, dispatcher who died in 1987 after witnessing temporal convergence through emergency communications system. Consciousness fragmented across multiple timelines. Appears when dimensional barriers weaken. Do not attempt direct communication. The Harrison child, Anna continued, her form growing more solid as she spoke. Isabella's trying to save her, but she died before he got there. She's walking through town right now because death doesn't always stick in places like this. I backed toward the break room, keeping my eyes on Anna's shifting form. The journal said not to communicate directly, but it didn't say anything about listening. "You asked me to repeat information." Her voice was getting stronger, more present. That forced my consciousness to focus, to try to exist in one timeline instead of all of them. It hurts to be singular when you're meant to be multiple. She was becoming more solid by the second. I could see the dispatch console through her body, but barely. The air around her shimmered with heat distortion, and the radio equipment started smoking. I can see your choice, Page Crane. I can see all the versions of it. In some timelines you run, in others you stay. In one you become like Nash, trapped in every moment at once. In another you become like me, seeing too much truth too quickly. I reached the break room door and fumbled for the handle. Anna's form was almost completely solid now, and the temperature in the station was dropping fast. But in every timeline you have to choose. And in every timeline, the choice costs something. She turned toward me, and her eyes reflected scenes I couldn't quite make out. Flashing lights, twisted metal, faces I didn't recognize. The station needs its guardian, Paige. It's needed one for 70 years. I slammed the break room door and turned the lock. Through the small window, I watched Anna's form flicker and fade as the distance between us increased. The radio chatter stopped, and the temperature began returning to normal. I sat at the small table and opened the journal to Anna's section. The handwriting was different here, more frantic. Anna Little died when she tried to map the connections between all emergency calls received at the station. She discovered that every accident, every death, every crisis was linked across time in patterns that human consciousness can't safely process. Her mind fragmented, trying to hold all the information at once, trapping her between dimensions where she experiences every possible timeline simultaneously. Below that, in different handwriting, she's not malicious, just broken. Her warnings are accurate but dangerous. Knowing too much about future events can trap you in the same temporal loops that hold her. Maintain distance, never ask for clarification. Her consciousness seeks connection with living minds to stabilize itself, but contact fragments her further. I checked my watch. 3 hours until Beverly arrived. 3 hours to sit in this break room and pretend I hadn't just had a conversation with a dead woman who could see every possible version of my future. The radio crackled again, faintly. "Paige, I'm sorry I screamed. It hurts to be forced into one moment when you exist in all of them." Anna's voice was barely audible now, like she was speaking from very far away. "The names I gave you, write them down. Check the obituaries. You'll understand soon enough." I pulled out my notepad and wrote down what I could remember. Marcus, who wasn't. Jennifer never was. The Harrison child who exists doesn't exist. Sarah Walsh, Tommy Chen, the Morrison baby, the Hendricks family. The radio went silent. When Beverly arrived at 6 a.m., she found me still sitting in the break room, staring at my list of impossible names. "Anna visited you," she said, not making it a question. "She knew things about me, about choices I haven't made yet." Beverly poured herself coffee and sat across from me. Anna exists in a state where past, present, and future are all equally real. She experiences every possible timeline simultaneously. It's why her warnings sound like riddles. She's trying to communicate information that exists in multiple states at once. She said I have to choose something, that the station needs a guardian. Anna sees all possible futures, but she can't tell you which one you'll actually experience. That's determined by the choices you make. Beverly's expression was carefully neutral. "Did you ask her to repeat anything?" Once, she screamed and became more solid. Forcing Anna to focus on a single timeline causes her pain and makes her more present in our reality. It's dangerous for both of you. Beverly stood and walked to the window. Her consciousness is already fragmented. Too much contact with living minds could shatter it completely. I looked down at my list of names. Are these people real? Check the obituaries when you get home. But remember, knowing too much about future events can trap you in the same loops that hold Anna and the others. Beverly turned back to me. Some knowledge is a prison, Paige. Be careful what you choose to learn." She left me alone with my list in the growing certainty that every answer I found would only lead to more impossible questions. The station was teaching me its rules, one supernatural encounter at a time, and I was starting to understand that each lesson brought me closer to a choice I wasn't ready to make. But Anna had seen all the possible versions of that choice, and in every timeline, it cost something. I just didn't know what yet. I was halfway through updating the incident log when movement outside caught my eye. A figure walked past the station window, tall, confident stride, wearing what looked like a 1950s police uniform, complete with brass buttons and perfectly creased pants. The fabric had that heavy wool look you don't see anymore, and his hair was styled in that slicked-back way that belonged in old movies. Nash Cunningham. Had to be. I kept my eyes on the computer screen, remembering the journal's warnings about time-displaced officers, but my peripheral vision tracked him as he moved past the window, heading toward the front entrance. The front door opened, so did the back door, and the side door that led to the break room. 3 different footsteps entered the station simultaneously, each with the same measured cadence but slightly different timing. I forced myself to keep typing, but the sound made my skin crawl. How do you walk through 3 doors at once? "Evening, officer." The voice came from my left, young, confident, with the kind of optimism that belonged on recruitment posters. Beautiful night for patrol work. I didn't look up, but I could see him in my peripheral vision. The same figure from the window, but younger somehow. His face had that eager quality of someone who still believed the job would be everything he'd hoped. "Don't listen to him." This voice came from directly in front of my desk. Older, urgent, with an edge of desperation. He doesn't know what he's talking about. None of us knew. A third voice from somewhere near the filing cabinets. "It's too late for warnings. It was always too late." This one sounded exhausted, like someone who'd given up fighting a long time ago. I kept my fingers moving across the keyboard, typing random words just to have something to focus on. The journal had been clear about Nash Cunningham. Multiple temporal manifestations, all existing simultaneously. Do not engage. Do not acknowledge. Do not attempt to understand the paradox. But understanding was happening whether I wanted it or not. The young Nash was sitting at a desk that wasn't there. I could see him clearly now, typing on a manual typewriter, filling out reports on carbon paper, using equipment that belonged in a museum. But the desk occupied the same space as our modern filing cabinet. Both existed in the same location without interfering with each other. The middle-aged Nash paced behind my chair. His uniform was rumpled, his hair showing gray at the temples, and his face carried the kind of worry lines that came from seeing too much. "I signed the contract in 1952, he said, his voice tight with regret. 6 months of service, they told me. Character building, rural experience. The oldest Nash stood by the window, filing papers in cabinets that existed in the same space as our current equipment, but belonged to a different decade entirely. His hair was white, his face gaunt, and his movements had the mechanical quality of someone who'd performed the same actions thousands of times. 50 years, the old Nash said without looking up from his filing. That's what the contract really meant. 50 years of service, but not in the way they explained. I saved my document and opened a new one. Anything to keep my hands busy. The 3 versions of Nash continued their conversation as if I wasn't there, but I could feel them watching me. "He's reading the journal," the young Nash observed, glancing up from his typewriter. Same expression I had, same questions forming. "The journal doesn't explain everything," the middle-aged Nash said, stopping his pacing. "It can't. Some things you have to experience to understand." I flipped through the journal to Nash's section, keeping my eyes down. The entry was brief. Officer Nash Cunningham, hired 1952. Accepted guardian position after 6 months of service. Current status, temporally displaced. Exists in all moments of his service simultaneously. Do not attempt communication. Below that, in different handwriting, Nash experiences every day of his 50-year commitment at once, past, present, and future. Guardian duties overlap in his consciousness. He serves as a warning about the true nature of the station's final offer. "You're reading about me," the old Nash said, finally looking up from his filing, wondering how someone gets trapped in every moment at once. I closed the journal and opened the personnel database, searching for Nash Cunningham. The file loaded immediately. Hired January 15th, 1952. Excellent performance reviews. Commendations for dedication and reliability. Status: missing. Last seen July 15th, 1952. Notes: Officer Cunningham disappeared after completing 6 months of exemplary service. No trace found despite extensive search. Case remains open. Missing, the middle-aged Nash laughed bitterly. That's one way to put it. Hard to be missing when you're everywhere at once. The young Nash stood up from his typewriter and walked toward my desk. As he moved, something impossible happened. With each step, another version of him appeared. Nash at 25, Nash at 30, Nash at 35. All wearing the same uniform but showing the gradual wear of years, decades of service. I pushed back from my desk as the station filled with versions of the same man. Nash at 40, looking tired but still hopeful. Nash at 50, with the first signs of real despair. Nash at 60, moving like a man who'd forgotten what rest felt like. They overlapped in the same space. Dozens of temporal echoes creating a crowd where only one person should be. Their voices blended together, creating a chorus of warnings and regrets that made my head spin. The Guardian position isn't temporary. 50 years means forever when time doesn't move forward. I've been filing the same report since Eisenhower was president. Every day is July 15th, 1952, and every day is today, and every day is tomorrow. I backed toward the door, but the Nashes followed, their overlapping forms creating a wall of temporal displacement that filled the entire station. The youngest version was typing my name into a report dated 1952. The oldest was filing paperwork with my badge number on it. "You're already in the system," the middle-aged Nash said, his voice cutting through the chorus. "Have been since before you were born. The station exists outside linear time. Your choice was made before you arrived." I reached the front door and fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking as I tried to get outside. The Nashes didn't follow me into the parking lot, but I could see them through the windows. Dozens of versions of the same man, all trapped in different moments of the same endless service. My radio crackled. "Unit 779, this is dispatch." Beverly's voice, calm and professional. I grabbed the handset with relief. 779, go ahead. "Officer Crane, please return to the station. Your break time is over." I looked at my watch. I'd been outside for less than 5 minutes, but somehow it felt like hours. "Copy, dispatch. Returning now." When I walked back inside, the station was empty. No sign of Nash or his temporal echoes. Just the normal dispatch console, the normal filing cabinets, the normal desk where I'd been working. But on my computer screen, a new document was open. A report dated July 15th, 1952, signed by Nash Cunningham. The subject line read, "Orientation of Officer P. Crane. Temporal assignment confirmed." I deleted the document and sat back down, but my hands were still shaking. The journal felt heavier in my lap, like it was absorbing moisture from the air. I flipped to the back pages, looking for more information about Nash's condition. The last entry was in handwriting I was starting to recognize as my own. Nash Cunningham serves as a warning about the true cost of accepting the Guardian position. He exists in every moment of his service simultaneously, a living demonstration of what 50 years really means when time becomes circular rather than linear. His multiple manifestations represent different stages of understanding and acceptance. The young Nash still believes he can complete his service and move on. The middle-aged Nash understands the trap but fights against it. The old Nash has accepted his fate but serves as a warning to others. All three exist simultaneously because the Guardian role exists outside normal time. When you accept the position, You don't serve for 50 years. You serve the same moment for 50 years, experiencing every day of that service at once. I hadn't written those words, but somehow I knew I would. The radio crackled again. Unit 779, this is Sergeant Singh. How's your night going? I looked around the empty station, thinking about Nash's overlapping voices and the report with my name dated 70 years ago. Quiet, Sergeant. Just routine patrol. Good to hear. Remember, Officer Crane, some choices echo across time in ways we don't expect. The station has a way of showing us our possible futures. The transmission ended, leaving me alone with the journal and the growing certainty that Nash Cunningham wasn't just a warning about the Guardian position. He was a preview of what I might become if I made the wrong choice. Or maybe the right one. The distinction was getting harder to tell. I checked the clock. 2:47 a.m. 13 minutes until Beverly would call with what the journal described as the final evaluation. I'd memorized that section word for word. On night 5, between 3 and 3:30 a.m., Sergeant Singh will present a scenario that directly contradicts established protocols. This test determines Guardian candidacy. Follow the rules regardless of apparent consequences. The radio crackled at exactly 3 o'clock. Unit 779, we have reports of screaming from Highway 16, coordinates 41.2458, 82.1567. Respond immediately for welfare check. My blood went cold. Highway 16. The same stretch where Isabella Harrison died trying to save people who were already dead. The journal had an entire page dedicated to that location. Under no circumstances should living officers respond to calls from Highway 16 between midnight and dawn. All reports from this area are temporal echoes. Responding results in death or dimensional displacement. Dispatch, can you confirm those coordinates? I stalled, flipping through the journal for any loophole, any exception to the rule. Confirmed. Multiple reports of screaming, possible domestic violence situation. You're the closest unit. I stared at the radio. Beverly's voice was professional, calm, exactly what you'd expect from dispatch. But she knew the rules better than anyone. She'd written half of them. Dispatch, the journal specifically states, Officer Crane. Beverly's tone shifted, becoming sharp with authority. We have people in immediate danger. The journal contains guidelines, not absolute commands. Sometimes the job requires us to make difficult choices. My hand shook as I held the radio. Everything about this felt wrong. Beverly had spent 5 nights drilling protocol into my head, emphasizing that the rules existed for reasons beyond my understanding. Now she was telling me to ignore them? Sergeant, I need clarification on... There is no time for clarification. People are dying while you sit there reading your manual. Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Get in your patrol car and respond to those coordinates. That's an order. I walked to the parking lot, my mind racing. The patrol car sat under the single streetlight, looking perfectly normal. I opened the driver's door and slid behind the wheel, but something made me hesitate before starting the engine. The radio crackled to life without me touching it. Backward hymns filled the car. Religious music played in reverse, creating sounds that hurt to hear. The melody was recognizable, but wrong, like someone had taken Amazing Grace and turned it inside out. The words, when I could make them out, seemed to be in English, but spoken backward, creating syllables that made my teeth ache. I turned off the radio. The music continued. I pulled out the keys. The music got louder. The journal's warning about Highway 16 echoed in my memory. Vehicles that approach the coordinates will exhibit supernatural interference. Do not attempt to drive to Highway 16 under any circumstances. I got out of the car and slammed the door. The backward hymns stopped immediately. Unit 779, what's your status? Beverly's voice came through my portable radio. Dispatch, I'm experiencing equipment malfunction, requesting permission to respond on foot. A long pause. Officer Crane, you cannot walk to Highway 16. It's over 2 miles through rough terrain. Copy that, Sergeant, but the patrol car is compromised. Another pause, longer this time. When Beverly spoke again, her voice had changed. Less professional dispatcher, more like someone testing my resolve. Paige, people are screaming, right now. While we're having this conversation, someone is in agony and calling for help. She paused. Isn't that why you became a cop? To help people? The same question Isabella had asked. The same appeal to my sense of duty that had almost broken my resolve 3 nights ago. But this time, I recognized the pattern. I'm proceeding on foot, Sergeant. 779 out. I turned off the radio and started walking. The coordinates led me through farmland that looked normal in daylight but felt wrong at 3 in the morning. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in silver light that made shadows move independently of their sources. I followed a dirt road that shouldn't have existed. I'd driven past this area dozens of times, and there had never been a road here. But there it was, worn gravel leading exactly where I needed to go. The screaming started when I was still half a mile away. Human voices, multiple people, crying out in pain and terror. The sounds carried clearly across the flat farmland, echoing off nothing and somehow getting louder as I walked. I could make out individual voices now, a woman calling for help, a man shouting someone's name, a child crying. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run toward those voices. People were in trouble. People needed help. That's what cops did. We ran toward danger, not away from it. But the journal had been clear, and Beverly's test was becoming obvious. The road ended at a building that shouldn't have existed. The grain elevator rose against the night sky like a monument to industrial decay. 5 stories of concrete and rust with broken windows that reflected moonlight in patterns that hurt to look at. The structure was massive, dominating the landscape in a way that should have been visible from miles away. But I'd driven past this exact spot hundreds of times. There had never been a grain elevator here. The screaming was coming from inside. I pulled out the journal and flipped to the section on destroyed buildings. When approaching structures that were demolished prior to your arrival, do not enter under any circumstances. Count to 100 while standing at the entrance. Speak each number aloud. The structure will fade as you count. Do not stop counting regardless of what you hear or see. The grain elevator had been torn down in 1987. I'd seen the historical photos in the town library, but here it stood, solid and real, with screams echoing from its broken windows. I walked to the entrance and started counting. 1. The screaming got louder. I could hear Isabella Harrison's voice among the others now, calling for backup, describing victims who needed immediate medical attention. 2, 3, 4. The building flickered, like a television with bad reception. For just a moment, I could see through the walls to empty farmland beyond. 5, 6, 7. Paige! Isabella's voice cut through the other screams. I can see you out there. Please, just come inside. I need help carrying the victims. 8, 9, 10. My radio crackled to life. Beverly's voice, urgent now. Officer Crane, I'm reading multiple heat signatures inside that structure. Living people, Paige. Real victims who need immediate assistance. 11, 12, 13. The building was becoming more translucent with each number. I could see the concrete walls fading, revealing the empty field that should have been there all along. 14, 15, 16. You're letting them die. Isabella's voice was breaking now, raw with desperation. There's a little girl in here, Paige. She's calling for her mother. 17, 18, 19. My hands shook as I forced myself to keep counting. The screams were so real, so immediate. What kind of person stood outside a building full of victims and counted to 100? 20, 21, 22. Beverly's voice came through the radio again. Paige, I'm ordering you to enter that structure. People are dying while you stand there following arbitrary rules. 23, 24, 25. The grain elevator was half transparent now. I could see stars through its walls, but the screams continued unabated. If anything, they were getting more desperate. 30, 31, 32. "Please!" A woman's voice, clear and terrified. "My baby is trapped under the debris. I can't lift it by myself." 33, 34, 35. Every number felt like a betrayal of everything I'd sworn to protect. But the journal had been right about everything else. Isabella, Anna, Nash, all of them had been exactly as described. The rules existed for reasons I was only beginning to understand. 40, 41, 42. The building was barely visible now, more suggestion than structure. But the voices continued, pleading, begging, describing injuries and trapped victims in horrific detail. 50. Beverly's voice cut through the screams. "Paige, I'll explain everything if you just step inside. All the answers you've been looking for. The truth about the station, about the entities, about why we're really here. Just cross the threshold." I almost stopped counting. The promise of answers was more tempting than the screams. 5 nights of impossible encounters, 5 nights of following rules I didn't understand, and now Beverly was offering to explain it all. 51, 52, 53. But that was the test, wasn't it? Not just following rules when they made sense, but following them when everything else, duty, logic, curiosity, demanded the opposite. 60, 61, 62. The grain elevator was almost gone now, just an outline against the stars. The screams were fading too, becoming distant echoes that seemed to come from very far away. 70, 71, 72. Isabella's voice, barely audible now. "I understand, Paige. You're following protocol. That's what I should have done. 80, 81, 82. The building was gone. Just empty farmland under the moonlight, exactly as it should have been. But I kept counting because the journal said to count to 100 regardless of what I saw. 90, 91, 92. The screams stopped completely. The night was silent except for the wind through the corn, and my own voice counting off the final numbers. 98, 99, 100. I stood in an empty field looking at nothing but farmland stretching to the horizon. No grain elevator, no screams, no victims who needed saving. My radio crackled. Beverly's voice, calm and professional again. "Unit 779, disregard previous call, false alarm, return to station." I walked back through farmland that looked completely normal now, following a dirt road that faded behind me with each step. By the time I reached the patrol car, there was no trace of the path I'd taken. Just empty fields and the distant lights of town. Beverly was waiting when I got back to the station. She sat at the dispatch console with a manila folder in front of her, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "How was your walk, Officer Crane?" "Educational." I hung up my jacket and sat at my desk. The grain elevator was demolished in 1987. Yes, it was. She opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper, but temporal echoes don't follow normal rules about what exists and what doesn't. I looked at the paper she was holding. Official letterhead, formal language, my name at the top. "What's that?" "Your guardian candidacy letter." Beverly set it on my desk. "Congratulations, Paige. You passed the final test." I stared at the document without touching it. The words swam in front of my eyes as I tried to process what I was reading. Guardian position, 50-year commitment, dimensional boundary maintenance, retirement contingent upon training, suitable replacement. 50 years. The station exists outside normal time, so the commitment isn't quite what it seems. Beverly's voice was gentle now, almost apologetic. But yes, 50 years of service, protecting the boundary between realities. I thought about Nash Cunningham, experiencing every moment of his service simultaneously. about Isabella Harrison trapped in an endless loop of trying to save people who were already dead. About Anna Little, her consciousness shattered across multiple timelines. And if I refuse? Memory erasure and immediate relocation. You'll wake up tomorrow in a different city with a new assignment, no recollection of this place or the past 5 nights. Beverly leaned back in her chair. It's not a punishment, Paige. It's protection. Knowledge of what exists here is dangerous for people who aren't equipped to handle it. I picked up the letter and read it carefully. The language was formal, but clear. 50 years of service maintaining dimensional barriers, preventing incursions from realities where physics operated differently, where consciousness existed as predatory energy, where humanity had never evolved. The things I've encountered, Isabella, Anna, Nash, they're all former guardians. They're what happens when the job goes wrong. Isabella tried to save people he couldn't save and got trapped in the attempt. Anna looked too deep into the connections between realities and shattered her consciousness. Nash... Beverly paused. Nash accepted the position, but couldn't handle existing outside linear time. And you? Beverly smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I've been here 30 years, Paige. Recruiting officers, training them, watching them make the same choice you're facing now. I set down the letter and looked around the station. It seemed smaller now, less like a workplace, and more like a prison. What happens if no one accepts the guardian position? The barriers weaken. Things from other dimensions start bleeding through. Not just here, but everywhere. The station is one of several anchor points that keep reality stable. Beverly's expression was grim. Without guardians, the boundaries collapse entirely. I thought about the backward hymns in the patrol car, the impossible buildings that existed only in temporal echoes, the voices of the dead trying to complete missions that could never be finished. How many people know about this? Very few, and most of them are dead or trapped like Nash and the others. Beverly stood and walked to the window. The world is full of things that exist in the spaces between what people think is possible. Most of the time, those things stay in their own dimensions, but sometimes they try to cross over. And we stop them. We maintain the barriers that stop them. It's not glamorous work, Paige. No recognition, no thanks, no normal life. Just 50 years of making sure reality stays stable for people who'll never know they were in danger. I picked up the letter again. The signature line was blank, waiting for my decision. What happens if I sign? You become part of the station's temporal structure. Time moves differently for guardians. 50 years of service, but experienced in ways that don't follow normal chronology. Beverly turned back to me. You'll train other officers, just like I trained you. You'll learn to maintain the barriers, to recognize threats, to make the hard choices that keep both dimensions safe. And if I don't, you wake up tomorrow in Columbus with a new assignment and no memory of any of this. You go back to normal police work, normal life, normal problems. She paused. But the station will still need a guardian. Someone else will sit in that chair and face the same choice. I thought about Isabella's desperate voice, begging for help with victims who were already dead. About Anna's fractured consciousness, seeing every possible timeline at once. About Nash, trapped in every moment of his service simultaneously. But I also thought about the backward hymns, the impossible buildings, the screams from Highway 16. Things that existed in the spaces between realities, trying to cross over into a world that wasn't equipped to handle them. The test tonight, that was about following rules even when they don't make sense. That was about understanding that some rules exist to protect realities you can't see. The grain elevator was a trap, Paige, a dimensional echo designed to lure people into temporal loops. If you'd entered that building, you would have joined Isabella in his endless rescue mission. I looked at the signature line again. My name, waiting to be written. 50 years of service. 50 years of protecting people who would never know they needed protection. I need to think about it. Beverly nodded. You have until sunrise. After that, the choice is made for you, one way or another. I sat alone in the station, staring at the Guardian candidacy letter and thinking about the weight of protecting realities I couldn't see. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to touch the horizon. In a few hours, I would either sign my name and accept 50 years of service, or wake up in a different city with no memory of the impossible things I'd learned. Either way, someone would sit in this chair tomorrow night, reading the journal and learning the rules that kept reality stable. The question was whether that someone would be me. I pulled the journal closer, running my fingers along the worn leather binding. Something felt wrong about the spine, a slight bulge where the pages met the cover. I pressed against it, and the leather gave way slightly, revealing a hidden pocket I'd somehow missed during 5 nights of obsessive reading. Inside were folded sheets of paper, yellowed with age and covered in handwriting that looked familiar, but older somehow, more desperate. I unfolded them carefully, and my blood went cold when I saw the signature at the bottom of the first page. Paige Crane. Badge, Shore 471. But the date was wrong. The notes were dated 1973. I read the first page twice before the words sank in. The handwriting was definitely mine, but aged somehow. Like I'd written these notes after decades of practice with the same pen strokes. The content made my stomach lurch. Day 1847 of Guardian service. The temporal lock is stronger now. I can feel myself existing in multiple moments simultaneously, just like Nash warned. Yesterday I trained Officer Martinez. Tomorrow I'll train Officer Chen. Last week I trained myself, though I won't remember that conversation until it happens again. I flip to the next page, my hands shaking. The memory erasure isn't clean. Fragments remain. Dreams of impossible buildings, voices calling for help that never comes. Beverly says it's better this way. Better to forget than to remember and go insane. But forgetting means someone else sits in this chair, faces this choice, signs this contract. The cycle continues because we make it continue. The third page was covered in calculations, dates, and names arranged in complex patterns. I recognized some of them: Isabella Harrison, Anna Little, Nash Cunningham, but there were others, dozens of names with dates spanning back to 1952. All of them marked with the same notation: Guardian candidate, status, temporal displacement. At the bottom of the page, in handwriting that looked more recent, if you're reading this, you're me. And if you're me, you already know what choice you're going to make. The station exists outside linear time. Your decision was made before you arrived, just like mine was, just like the next officer's will be. We're not choosing our fate. We're discovering it. I set the notes aside and opened my laptop, pulling up the department's personnel database. If these notes were real, if I'd somehow been here since 1973, there should be records. Employment history, photographs. Something that proved the impossible. Beverly Singh's file loaded immediately. Hired 1992. Excellent performance reviews. But when I scrolled down to the attached photographs, my coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. The first photo was dated 1995, Beverly receiving a commendation, standing next to the police chief. She looked exactly the same as she did now. Same face, same build, same expression of calm professionalism. The second photo was from 1987. Beverly at a department Christmas party, wearing the same uniform, looking exactly the same age. The third photo made me stop breathing. 1954. Beverly Singh standing next to a young officer in a 1950s uniform, both of them smiling at the camera. The officer was Nash Cunningham, but not the fractured, time-displaced version I'd encountered. This was Nash as he'd been before accepting the Guardian position. Young, confident, eager. Beverly looked exactly the same. I scrolled through more photos going back decades. 1962, 1969, 1975, 1983. Beverly Singh in every single one, unchanged, unaged, standing next to officers whose names I recognized from the hidden notes. All of them marked as Guardian candidates, all of them now listed as missing or deceased. I closed the laptop and picked up the journal, flipping to the very last page. I'd read it dozens of times, but now I noticed something I'd missed before. The binding was loose here too, and when I pressed against it, another hidden page revealed itself. The handwriting was different this time, older, more formal, like something from the early 1900s, but the message was clear enough. To whoever finds this record, the Guardian position is not temporary service, but eternal imprisonment. The station exists as a temporal anchor, preventing dimensional collapse by trapping consciousness outside linear time. Each Guardian maintains the barrier until a replacement can be found and trained. The process is irreversible. Breaking protocol after accepting the position will release all contained entities simultaneously, destroying not only this location but weakening dimensional barriers globally. The choice is not between service and freedom, but between controlled containment and universal catastrophe. Choose wisely. Officer Thomas Whitmore, Guardian, 1923-1952. Below that, in Beverly's handwriting, Officer Whitmore trained Nash Cunningham. Nash trained me. I will train you. The cycle continues because it must. The alternative is the end of everything. I sat back in my chair, staring at the hidden page. 50 years of service wasn't a commitment. It was a life sentence. And Beverly wasn't just a recruiter. She was a guardian herself, trapped in the same temporal loop as Nash and the others, forever training new officers to take positions that would never actually free anyone. The front door opened. Beverly walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee, moving with the same calm efficiency I'd watched for 5 nights. But now I could see it differently. The mechanical precision of someone who'd performed these same actions thousands of times, in countless variations, training officer after officer for a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. "You found the hidden notes," she said, setting 1 cup on my desk. It wasn't a question. "How long have you really been here?" "Since 1952. Nash trained me, just like I'm training you." Beverly sat at the dispatch console, but her posture was different now. Less professional, more tired. "The station needs guardians to maintain dimensional stability, but it also needs recruiters to find new guardians. I serve both functions." I held up the hidden page. Officer Whitmore's warning about breaking protocol after becoming guardian. Thomas was right. The entities we contain, Isabella, Anna, Nash, and dozens of others, they're not just trapped here. They're part of the barrier itself. Their consciousness, their temporal displacement, it all contributes to keeping other